Hi, welcome to another constant analysis. My analysis today is in Italian. If you follow my videos, you may remember that I did one recently in Urdu. So I'm very pleased to actually have this one, although the subject matter is not very pleasing. But it's nice to be able to do a language different or other than English. So this the context of this analysis, I'll just read out what I've put here. Back in 2004, in the maelstrom of Iraq, 4 Italian security contractors were taken hostage by pro-Saddam militants. They were brought out into the desert, made to dig their own graves, while being videoed by their captors. One of the hostages, Fabrizio Quattrocchi, was made to kneel beside the grave, a hood placed over his head, as his kidnappers prepared to execute him. So quite a serious thing, really. My interpretation, based on the analysis, is that several secret agents were intercepted while undercover in Iraq during the presidency of Saddam Hussein. They were subsequently questioned, tortured, killed one after the other, and interred in the desert. The final captain, who was killed after some captives had been killed and interred, at least one day afterwards, was brought, who was presumably Italian, was taken to the spot where his comrades had been taken, treated badly, and in much weakness, having suffered much beating, thirst and hunger, was recorded as saying, under the heat of the sun, "Vi vedere con more un Italiano." Forgive my Italian if it's if it's not very good. The English translation for that is, "I will show you how an Italian dies." And so, as usual, I've gone over the highlights. I've looked at the different markers, the consonant markers in the text. I've gone over the highlights, the highlighted. Basically, I've gone over the markers and highlighted certain points about them, which has led me to the interpretation which I've just read to you. So, I mean, all in all, that's exactly the picture you get. In the analysis, what I've done in themes, I've got like themes which are just basically, I've taken keywords out of my main analysis, which is a long list of definitions, to make it easier for you to read. And in the themes, what you'll find is I've categorized them under various headings, the keywords. So I've concentrated on the people and the environment. And what struck me about this analysis was the environment doesn't come out quite strongly. I really felt I was there actually while I was conducting this analysis, because of the various keywords that come out, which I don't often get. They were fairly unique to this particular analysis. So the actual subject, this person who made the statement, I've broken him down into 4 different people. In other words, the 4 different roles that he portrays, which is as a foreign national, as a person in his own right, travelling to the country, as a secret agent, and as a prisoner. And the captors, they just take one heading basically, because they only came into the story at the point at which they were actually occupied that particular position. So that's what I would say. It's not very good, I don't see why people need to fight with each other, really, and why people just can't get on. I really don't see it. I don't see how it's justifiable, to take somebody's life, unless they've killed somebody, then in some jurisdictions there may be justification for that. But a human being is like a sacred creature, which is one of the things that comes onto in this analysis. Inviolable. Human beings are inviolable. We're an expensive piece of kit, essentially. There's nothing like us anywhere in the universe. But as a result of human beings being all the same, we lose our value. But a human is much more valuable than, say, a tree, for example. which is not an animate thing, and we're much more intricate in the way that we're designed. So it's just you become desensitized. We become desensitized. We think, oh, that's a poor person. That's a poor person out on the street, but oh, that's a rich person. But the thing is, they're exactly the same. It's just the circumstances that are different, not the individuals. So there should be no reason to judge anybody better or worse than another person, except on their behaviour, which again often is it's an offshoot of circumstance. It's the circumstances they find themselves in. So really, we should be trying to help each other, and not engage in these things. It's very distasteful to me to find that somebody shed blood. I shouldn't even. I don't even like mention this term. So so yeah, obviously, my condolences go to out to the families of these people that were killed, and with regards to the families of the people that were doing the killing, you should be more educated and teach your children, to behave in a superior moral manner. Anyway, that's my little my little rant on my soapbox. I'll get off now and go into the analysis, which you'll find there's a copy of it, a link to the copy of it in the description below. So highlights so I've got the word vi, which is the first. Remember this captive, what he said was vi faccio vedere come un italiano. That I'll show you how an Italian dies. So vi is the first word, and it translates in English to I, and it's highlighted in red in the report. And I've interpreted as follows. This is the forward analysis. I've done a forward and reverse analysis. And sorry, I will get into the analysis at some point. But what that means is that the way I perform my analysis is I take the consonants, that's i.e. not the vowels or vowel sounds, out of somebody's speech, and then I either read them forwards as they appear in the speech, or I reverse them and then read them. And the reverse usually gives like the intention or the underlying meaning behind what a person's saying, not what they're saying, but what they actually mean and what the reason why they're saying it. And in some cases I do, if I've got enough time and the extract is short enough, I'll do both analyses, because that way I maximise the information that I'm obtaining. So in this case, I've done a reverse and a forward analysis, and I'm reading them both out together in the highlights that I'm going through now. So I'll just carry on with that now. So for the forward analysis for V, which means I in English, I've put I have dealt the interpretation is I've dealt you a heavy blow. And what I've done also is I've put connections between the word and the interpretation. How are they linked? Yeah, because the interpretation, it's just my understanding or my idea. It's not the actual word itself. So by rights, there should be a link between them. And what I've done is I've tried to arrive at how those two are linked. So the report makes some sort of sense. But I'm not going to read those out. I'll let you go into the report and actually read those yourself, because otherwise it would take too long to go through them. So for the forward analysis for V, I have dealt you with a heavy blow. For the reverse analysis, I put pay attention to me. I am not some animal. Treat me with respect. Have some respect. With regards to the word faccio, which translates as will, like in English we'd say will as to do something in the future. I will do this. I've interpreted as, in the forward analysis, I have dealt you a heavy blow. I seem outwardly composed, courageous and brave, but I'm inwardly lost. I'm only doing a job, and I really long for home. I'm remembering how the mission started, how much of a contrast it is to how everything has turned out. The reverse analysis interpretation I've given, my burial will remain on this land as a testament to our imminent victory, a recompense for my meticulous and subsequent beating. So basically what he's saying is that we are going to win, we are going to be victorious, and all that I've had to put up with and all my planning, it was actually worth it, for me to die and be buried here, and that's what my death and my burial will be remembered for. I have suffered a catastrophic loss For being indicted of a crime, I have been separated from my colleagues and my country, which grieves me. I have reached the end and have given up hope. I lack the strength to go on. And then at this point, the agent spits at his captors and digs with dirty fingernails as his guards watch on with pointed rifles. So moving on to the word vedere. Vedere translates to see or show, as in I will show you, and it's translated as, I've interpreted as in the forward analysis, the job I was hired to do made me homesick. It involved mixing in among the people in a new place with a new language. I had to get to work, destroy something and keep quiet without getting caught. As it was, I got caught. While I tried to hide my real intentions and pacify them, with every trick and story at my disposal, the Iraqis weren't buying the story. In the morning I knew they were taking me somewhere. I had to think of an escape plan. Now, out in the burning sun, I just desperately want a drink. And the reverse analysis for vedere is, I'm convinced that we will gain the ascendancy. In other words, Italy or the Allied powers will gain the other hand. And that is my aim. I will do whatever I can to lend my weight to that end. Having said that, it is quite a tedious job, which makes me bored and restless. I've served my country and now this is the repayment for my boredom, to suffer a beating and then follow my fellow countrymen to the grave. So there's a bit of a contrast actually to previously where he's talking about, or I've interpreted that what he's talking about is something in glowing colours, it's a wonderful thing. There's another side to it, which is it's quite tedious and boring. And he's got those feelings going on at the same time while he's stood by his grave waiting to be executed. To suffer a beating and then follow my fellow countrymen to the grave, to be picked off one after the other and then buried, to be insignificant nothing. And I've put, despite his meticulous work, the agent still harvests feelings of embarrassment for being caught. His last day grows closer towards its end, because it's mentioned like of the sun, the sunlight declining or the shadows. With regards to the word com, which translates to how in English, for the forward analysis I'd put, I had to plan an escape. I'd get ready to pounce on the guard. I'd get ready to pounce on the guard, pretend to be friendly, keep my cool, take it easy, keeping in what I've taken from Iraq as a secret. As it was, I was taken at speed. I tried to win them over with words, wavering though they are. Friendliness and compliance are the key. As it was, I was frog-marched and met with hostility. And for the reverse analysis for com, which means how, I've got the day is drawing to a close as the subject is dragged along and thrown to the ground. It is a polarised situation with prejudices on both sides, mirrored in the contortions of his body as his hands are tied behind his back. When the mission began, it was easier to accommodate his enemies, but now at this stage he only feels the need to rebel. He feels sure that he has achieved his objective. Iraq will be delivered into the hands of the West. Iraq will become populated with his people. They will consolidate their strength. The sack placed over his head is a sign of success, the fruit of his charm, defiance and deception. So for the word muor, which translates in English as die, for the forward analysis I put, it seemed certain, being on the wrong side, that the sun was setting for me. At every turn I still hoped for the downfall of the Iraqis, all the while trying to win them over with every lie I could think of. I held out hopes, which helped to keep me calm, but as the situation continued and nothing was working, I became increasingly agitated. And for the reverse analysis for more, which means translates as die in English, I've got, the agent is thrown to the ground, shots are fired around him, he curses his captors. He has to get the information to his people, being treated like a piece of dirty rubbish. His shock is such that he loses control of himself and urinates in his trousers. As he totters and staggers, ultimately falling prostrate on the ground. There is actually mention of that, of leaking or oozing or seeping through. And the only thing I could possibly imagine that relates to is somebody losing control of his, urinary function because he's like so shocked. So that's why I've included that there. Otherwise, that's very unusual. It's something very unusual, but that's the only thing that it fits. It wouldn't fit anything else that I could imagine. Um, theme 6, the word un, translated as an in English, is highlighted in plum and is interpreted as, and that is un Italiano, in other words, an Italian. Yeah. So for forward analysis, I put, I'm on my own, singled out, defenceless. I have no option but to go along with things. And in the reverse analysis, I put, the subject tries to protect himself, rolling along in the dust as he is beaten. He is weak, and in trying to speak, he only manages to prattle and mumble to himself. And just to remind you, when I'm talking about reverse and forward analyses here, the interpretation will be different. In other words, if you take 3 consonants out of some speech, when you reverse them, the reverse meaning is actually different to the. In most cases, it depends if it's a palindrome. In other words, it reads the same forwards and backwards. But if it's got a different meaning, if you reverse it, it will literally have a different meaning, a different connotation, and that's why for each theme, for each highlighted section of the speech, in other words, each word, when you actually reverse the consonants within that word, they do yield different meanings. Italiano. Now you think that this doesn't have much of a meaning, or it would just mean Italian, but it doesn't actually. It comes out as something quite different, because we're actually reading 3 consonants at a time. We're not actually reading the whole word. However, in most contexts, it would mean probably the same thing if you give or take the words on either side, but majority, it would mean the same thing. And this gives rise to the notion of different nations behaving in different ways. Like people in Italy will have a different type of character from people, say, like in Botswana or Venezuela or Sierra Leone, for example. And the reason for that is because it comes down to their speech patterns. Yeah, the speech patterns that they use. Not necessarily what they call themselves, like Italian or Sierra Leone or whatever. But that's why they have definite national characters. It's because of the language set, the lexicon, and the way that the words interact with each other. So in this case, we've got Italiano. He's actually used it there. He's actually used the eponymous word, or the main word for Italians, which who knows how often that gets used. And what he's said in the forward analysis, what this is interpreted to mean is, as the vehicle came. You won't believe this, but this is what the interpretation is. As the vehicle came to a swift halt, and with it the usual clattering and noises made by such a vehicle, like a jeep going throughout the desert. I presume that's what it was. That's what everybody drives there, isn't it? Humvees or whatever, your Land Rovers. Lamenting with pomposity, more than ever trying to keep his thoughts on what his purpose was, believing that he lived for a purpose, trying to rationalise out his current situation because he was in shock. He was dragged out by his hair and thrown to the place where he would finally lay. And there is reference to tufts of hair. The place was already awash with the stench of what must certainly have been his former comrades. There is mention of that, and I mentioned it in themes in environment. There was a stink, and that leads me to believe that he wasn't the first one to be killed, and there was a delay between him being killed and other people. Now, I don't know, actually. It could well have been. It might not have been people from his team or his group. It might have been a graveyard, or who knows. But I'm just interpreting that I mean, I haven't actually seen the video that's mentioned in the context, so I don't know. But for sure, there was the stench of bodies, because it actually comes out in the report. So while he's trying to rationalise out his current situation, he's dragged out by his hair and thrown to the place where he would finally lay. The place was already awash with the stench of what must certainly have been his former comrades. This is what I assume. It's just an interpretation. Badly beaten and semi-unconscious, in a state of shock, he manages to utter, almost mumble, the final words of strength and resolution. Vi faccio vedere come amor un italiano. I will show you how an Italian dies. He persists until the end. He achieves in the full sense of the word by giving his life. So he's given his life for his country. What more could you do? And for reverse analysis, I put, I may be weak, but I am still an Italian agent. I'm feeling the fact that I have compromised my cover. I'll have to wait and see what happens next. At least we managed to achieve our objective. We've dealt the Iraqis a blow. I'm certain of that. I'm not sure where I'm going now. They're beating me and I don't really know what I'm saying. I'm cowering in the dust from the beating. The agent mumbles incoherently. Now, with regards to, I've made various comments, and to keep the video short, I won't actually go over those. I'll let you read those yourself in the report below. But I'll just go over them. I'll just go over the titles that precede them. So there's talk of success. There's indications of success. There's mention of the plucking of the hair, like I said, and the offensive smell. Overall, what actually comes through in the report or in the analysis is what the context that's been mentioned by the original reporter. I took this quote from an entry in Quora, which is a website that people ask questions and people answer questions on. Quora, Quora.com. So if you go there, you can have answers to lots of questions. So you can pose a question, and people who are perhaps experts will come in and answer that question for you. The exact markers as if you don't know what exact markers are basically three consonants which in my source reference have an exact match. So I call them exact markers, because there are some markers, a lot of markers that we say, or consonants we say that don't actually have a match in my source reference. So what I do with those is I just basically take the two markers on either side of where that marker would be from the source reference, and I actually just use those instead. And they're usually very accurate, very accurate with regards to the meaning that they yield for the particular context. And in this case, the exact markers, as usual, they form a skeleton. So when you go through the report, if you go through it, if you look at find the exact markers, there's only a few of those for the reverse and the forward analyses, and they give a skeleton outline of the main points of what actually went on according to this extract of speech. Food, there's references to food, and as you'd expect, normal human activity, eating food, isn't it? And like I said, with themes, you know how I've grouped them, basically. I've grouped them according to the people that are involved. So quickly moving on to themes, because time's pressing on now. We've got the environment. So I'll go over that one. Arrive, clatter, decomposition, dirt, dust, extend far into the distance, language new, people, shadows moving, stink, sun setting, tree, shade, and vast. The subject is a person in his own right. I've got catastrophic loss, homesick, loved ones, memories, travel and visit. The subject is a foreign national. Hegemony, that means, you know, the power or the influence or the control of a particular nation. Gain, power country. Patriotic, religion, resident, be. There's actually a marker for to convert to a religion. The subject as an agent, conscious or concerted actions. In other words, this is active. I won't go over those because there's quite a lot. You can read those yourself down in the report below. Captors, the people that captured him. Accuse, beating, burial, debasement, grab, hair. Hostile, hurl, suspicious, toss, and shoot. And prisoner, involuntary or passive action. In other words, he wasn't active in what he was doing. There's quite a lot of markers there, as you'd imagine, so I'm not going to read those out. They're down in the report below. So that's all I have for you today. From a seemingly short statement, a punchy statement, from a prisoner, a spy who'd been captured, who was about to be, executed. We get the whole story. Consonant analysis brings it out. It is my interpretation. But I try to be as truthful and as accurate as I can. if you like the interpretation and you like my analysis, please do remember to give me a like, and share and subscribe, and look forward to seeing you in the next analysis.